of Beating Alpha. This is episode 163, and we have a very special guest. His name is Spencer Hilligoss. So Spencer is a passive real estate investor and a co-sponsor and former technology leader. So his company, Madison Investing, that of course, for more information, you can find that information on madisoninvesting.com. He's co-sponsored deals totaling more than 5,000 units for more than $600 million. Spencer investing in syndication as an LP and actively leads Madison Investing alongside with co-founder wife Jennifer Morimoto. So as a technology leader, Spencer built a 13-year track record of growing high-performing teams across 5 companies, 3 of them being unicorns valued at more than $1 billion. So in November 2019, Spencer retired from his lucrative technology career, leaving behind the $4 billion loan origination teams he built at Lending Home, funding 600 fixed flip transactions per month. Now he's focused on spending time with the loved ones and growing Madison Investing by helping passive investors achieve their goals. So Spencer, thank you again for coming over today and spending this quality time with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, honored to be here. I love talking about this stuff. So really great to connect and really great to talk.
Exactly. It's a good time. It's a good time. A lot of people, they know it's kind of very confusing, time for a lot of people, and, having some clarity when it comes to investing and making better investment decisions, it's always good. So I'm happy that you're here today. We can, clarify, about multifamily investing and how it looks like for the people that are looking to invest in those type of deals. But first of all, because I'm very curious to find out your personal background, because I know a lot of people ask you that, again, just looking at what you accomplished, again, with this technology company. So can you take us back to that time and how did you get involved with these companies?
Yeah, happy to. I think simply said, I grew up around technology. I grew up in the Bay Area, California, which is where I'm sitting right now on a little island called Alameda. It's just tucked right between Oakland, California and San Francisco. Just right across the water, I can see the city. So I grew up in this environment, and I've been encouraged by other investors, full-time investors, to come out in the open and tell people I didn't necessarily join real estate, just in the last few years. I've actually technically been in real estate since I was as young as 6 years old. I don't know if that counts as meaningful experience necessarily, but my dad was a broker. He was one of the top performing brokers in the country back in the 90s. So I kind of grew up inside a real estate business. Didn't really enjoy working for it. He was making me work open houses in massive, nice looking mansion style homes, doing showings, and so I was actually in the guts of a real estate brokerage business before most people had even finished high school. And because I saw that, and I saw so much of that rise that, that my dad had as a broker, I learned a lot, but because I also watched the downfall. Unfortunately, we hit some really tough times after he grew that business. And this is a brief story, but it sets such critical context as to why I do what I do now. We hit a time where, my brother lost his life to cancer when he was a teenager. My parents got divorced shortly after, yada, yada, yada. And a bunch of stuff happened in this dark decade. And you guys don't need my whole life story, but you need to hear about the rise and fall of a real estate business that I got to be a part of early in my life. Informs how I approach things now. And so I didn't want to go into a real estate company when I got out of college. I wanted to go carve my own thing out because that's what we typically do compared to our parents. We want to have our own stamp on things. So I went and joined technology companies and flash forward, across 13 years and 5 software companies, which you really eloquently outlined earlier. I learned that there's a lot of really critical skills and knowledge that you gain when trying to build something up from nothing. And most of the companies I was in were very early stage. I had one 5-year run at a company called Intuit. Most people know it because it makes TurboTax and QuickBooks. And I learned a lot in the big company environment. But the last one that I finally, quote unquote, retired from was just a year ago. As you mentioned, it was in November 2019. And that was a real estate tech company. And it was a marketplace. You could have crowdfunding on one side for accredited investors. You could have loans for fix and flippers on the other side. And I ended up getting the real estate bug in a huge way. And but I also looked at the fact that, my own family had been following the Silicon Valley wealth plan, as it were, the unwritten one, the not good one, which so many people end up doing, which is they think if they go join early stage company, they get meaningful equity, They work really hard at those notorious 80 to 100-hour plus weeks, grinding it out to build these companies that they're going to get some big Google, Facebook, exit financially, like some
Like that's
huge
going to work
liquidity.
out.
Yeah, that's somehow going to work out, and it'll absolve all their financial sins. And that's just not the reality for most people, unfortunately. And so I was banking on that for too long, and I ultimately was doing 401k, index fund investing, the basics, like most people. And finally, it occurred to me when we have two kids, they're now 6 and 3, and my infant son was he was infant at the time with our first kid, and I was just hitting the wall. I was burnt out. I was not prepared to commit to doing this lifestyle for the next 30, 40 years. And I knew there was just a better way to use our money. And so we started investing passively as LPs, or limited partners, in syndications and multifamily. And this is after we went through a brief stint, of course, buying rentals and single family homes, which we still have now. We have a modest portfolio. We bought local, then we bought turnkey in the Midwest United States. And then we finally found our way to multifamily. But now we help other people get there faster. And so what we do full time is I help people invest in multifamily. Our primary focus now is actually even storage. So our primary competency and focus is helping people invest as passive investors in storage opportunities and multifamily. And so I'm a co-sponsor, registered securities professional, and we have a group where people can sign up, and we will not only I join them in the GP. I find a sponsor, take 3 to 6 months to vet them, background check them, even invest our own money in them. And then and only then will we take a look at their deals and actually consider them and partner with them on a deal. So that was a mouthful, but I answered your question and then went on some tangents. So hopefully that was helpful.
Definitely it is. I mean, and if you want to go as long as you want, again, with a personal story, because those stories personal, I love those stories. And I think people do as well, because from those stories, we find a lot of great valuable tips. And, some of those tips, as you said, those kind of bad stories that gives us strength and the knowledge and perseverance to to go through these tough times and gain some maybe tougher skin, and it gives us wisdom. So there's a lot of good stuff in those bad times and those challenges, so which is awesome. It's a great story. So, and part of it is you and your wife, kind of, because your wife is a co-founder of Madison Investing. So maybe again, before we move on into technical side, can you give advice for the people, because during these times there is a lot of probably single or couples, and they kind of looking what's going to happen in the future. Maybe they're looking to transition and build their own personal business. Doesn't have to be real estate, but a business. And what will be your advice for couples who want to build a business together?
Oh my gosh, that is such an underexplored topic, and I'm really pumped that you asked about it. Seriously, it's I personally think that when people ask me what is like the number one strategic advantage that we have at Madison Investing, and by a significant margin, I have to say my co-founder. And it allows us to make holistic decisions across being a whole, a family unit, with our kids, trying to be great parents, be present parents, and also be excellent business owners, responsible, prudent business owners. And so making decisions and trying to compartmentalize those things. If you ever ask an investor who, truly compartmentalizes, more power to them if they find success. And, if let's say it's one spouse A, they run down the hall and they go and they build a business, and spouse B, they decide they don't want anything to do with it. Then 10 years in, I hope they still have that figured out, because it's very tough to compartmentalize those things, So for us, getting there was not easy. We each had our own respective corporate careers for 10 plus years before we decided to go down this path. And in that regard, we learned the language of business separately. Jennifer, is a marketing executive, very capable and just brilliant in so many ways that I am not. So we're an excellent team. I came more from the world of leadership, operations, building groups quickly, a lot of process heavy stuff, and sales groups as well as operations groups. So we're just a match made in heaven, purely professionally. And then before we decided to work together in the business, we had 2 weekends in a row, this is a few years ago now, where we had to go set goals for what we were trying to achieve. And this is even before we picked our strategy. And that was key. We basically put out a bunch of sticky notes on a wall, covering most of this big wall, talking about our different goals, putting out a timeline, looking at saying 15 years out, okay, by 15 years out, can we be totally financially independent, requiring no income from any other sources other than the stuff that's passively coming in for ourselves. And we did that, and we realized it wasn't fast enough. And so we actually cut it down. We were like, okay, chop it in half. 7 years. How do we get there? And by going through that exercise, it forced us to have very candid decisions about what matters to us, and so we ended up having, in one day, multiple times over throughout a couple weekends, arguments, tears, laughter, and reconciliation. And we ran that cycle a couple times, because that's the level of candor and I think conversation you have to have if you're going to get down to the real topics, And so I really appreciate that you asked about that, because right now, I just couldn't be happier, not only with our business, but even more importantly, with our relationship, and we don't have to turn into a couples therapy session for anyone, but I would just say that it's certainly helpful to always start at the root and say, what really matters to us as partners in a relationship.
And that's very special. I mean, you're working together as a couple, as so that's pretty incredible, because at the same time, I mean, it's tough in general, just in a relationship, being in a relationship with other person, and again, adding a business side of it, it just makes things even more difficult. So the fact that you can manage that and not even manage or run the business successfully, it's quite impressive, so that's really awesome. So can you talk about the decision-making process behind, getting involved with multifamily? And now you're talking about the storage units. So why those two? Why not instead, let's say, office space, hotels, industrial type of units or something like that? Why multifamily and storage?
Yeah, I mean, interesting question for right now in COVID in particular, I think. So I looked at the investment theses and looked at all the data that was available historically, and we were talking about the benefit of me working at a company like Lending Home at the time. I started there about 2016. I went into a group that was doing 150 transactions, individual transactions per month. And these were like bridge loans, doing, 12-month term bridge loans for fix and flip projects, both for low experience, high experience folks. So by the time I left, we ended up doing about 600 loans per month. And why that stuff matters is because I was able to see just how decisioning goes from a lender's perspective. And it was incredibly educational for me. I mean, it was a frameworking education, because the power of frameworks is way understated out there. I think particularly in the real estate investing community, a lot of folks talk about criteria, setting your criteria. And what they're really talking about is a framework, and how critical a frameworking mindset and approach can be for making great decisions. And I'll come back to the asset question in a moment here, but I just want to hit on this point first, which is you got to say what matters to us, and I think in setting a comparison between single family homes, let's say, and multifamily, or let alone office space, retail, and the different commercial asset classes, I was already easily sold on the bigger is better narrative when you compare the dynamic between, let's say, single family homes. A few months ago, in our modest portfolio of rentals that we own, we had an eviction that had to get managed, of course, with our property manager. I don't manage those things hands-on. I love property management for that reason. But we still had to get on the phone. We still had to be involved to some degree. And that's a pain in the butt to deal with an eviction. It's also 100% occupancy dropping to 0% occupancy overnight when you lose a single family home tenant. So the narrative and the stability and the predictability of multifamily versus single family was already sold and done for me. I also really appreciate the rigor, a little bit more sophistication. And I'm just going to flat out say this. I used to be way more guarded and cautious about how I say this, but I've seen enough now to really just declare commercial real estate operates at a higher professionalism bar significantly. And so, I don't want to break too many hearts out there, because there are wonderful, effective, residential professionals out there. But the population also includes some folks that just don't really, there are a lot of cowboys. And
Yeah,
so,
well, unless you go about and buy portfolios of 200 houses or something like that, because the private funds are doing that, and I'm sure they're sophisticated enough.
Oh, absolutely, yes, and spot on. And I think, say in the future, particularly at this point in COVID, we are considering looking at some of that stuff right now more than ever, because of the cycle that we're in or approaching. To your point. So that said, bigger, better, more predictable. Love the sophistication level that goes into commercial real estate. We like multifamily because I believe in that thesis that if you look at the demographics, you look at the migration trends, people leaving these primary markets, these coastal cities, going towards, Sun Belt, going towards, secondary markets where it's just a more comfortable lifestyle. Not even going into the topic of extreme weather events driven by climate change, all that stuff. You've really got a picture that says people are going to be renting, and they appreciate the lifestyle that comes along with it. You can get great amenities. You don't necessarily know, you don't need to commit yourself to a certain location. And a lot of people, if you even look right now, I think I literally posted about this on LinkedIn this morning. Some folks are still going to miss the boat for first-time home buyers on a single-family home because they're not financially ready to be able to go buy a home, even though rates are low. So you got this narrative of the renter nation. People want to live in apartments. In some cases, they have to live in apartments. And so I think the renter base is growing. It's expected to continue growing. So stability is something that you can find within multifamily. And our portfolio is showing that in occupancy rates. I don't invest in California when it comes to apartments. I invest in places like Texas and North Carolina, South Carolina, Boise, Idaho, Colorado Springs, Colorado. These are all places that are growing population mightily. And so I love that narrative. Storage, quick comment on storage and why I love it as our primary focus right now is just because it does eke out a bit more recession resilience. I know that could be such a buzzword, but what it means really is that in a time when times are hard, in a recession, you look at the data from the past cycles, right? And those D words that are associated with storage that make it recession resilient are true. You see, it's a little grim to talk about, but death, dislocation, divorce, downsizing, these are all things that make people need to store their stuff. And as a result, the demand for storage will continue. And we just closed on a storage project just last Friday. So love that asset class. And, there's nuances and differences in how you underwrite them and what you have to look for, of course, but compare that to other asset classes. I also only go for what I understand. And, I think just taking a step back and simplifying things for folks, I don't feel comfortable saying that I have vetted a deal because that's what we commit to our passive investing group. We say that we've vetted a deal, and there's a lot of meat behind that point. 3 layers of diligence. I'm a registered securities professional. I have an analyst looked at it after I do, yada, yada. But if I don't understand something in detail, I can't stamp it and say I have thoroughly vetted it. So I understand storage. I understand multifamily. I'm not an expert on office. And office right now, that's a whole separate topic we probably don't want to go into now unless you wanted to, which is like, I don't think people know how office will be used in 12 months from now.
Yeah, there's it's redevelopments, a lot of redevelopments happening. Same in hotels, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who are positioning to buy those kind of cheaper price type of office buildings because they're going to be cheaper because of nobody leases them right now because everybody kind of works from home. I'm sure there's a few that are still operating because they maybe have to, but you can get those on a kind of good terms, and that will come out as a good return for the investors. But look, I do understand at the same time that that's not the strategy that you currently follow, because again, like it's very interesting because every time I have somebody on and they're kind of in a different real estate class, so that could be mobile home parks and hotels or wholesaling, whatever that is, they're convinced that that's the best kind of scenario to go with. You know what I mean? But at the same time, there are, it depends on everybody's strategy, because for some strategies, as you know, it will require more attention, more work, and your type of deals is very passive. I mean, all you have to do is just stroke a check, and that's pretty much it, and maybe have a few conversations in between. But that's pretty much, But besides what you're currently looking at, again, in multifamily and storage, would you see something else that you would pay attention to going forward? Let's say, maybe mobile home parks, or maybe, because of the limited supply in the market, or maybe the senior housing because of the, 10,000 kind of, seniors turning every day, and then maybe doing some senior housing projects as well.
Yeah, and I really appreciate going down these different asset class topics because I don't really get a chance to talk about them as often as I would really like to. It's fascinating stuff. I've one of the lessons I think I learned earlier in my real estate investing journey was that if you start hearing, if someone tells you it's my asset class or bust, your radar should go up, right? Because I mean, I now subscribe to being as asset class agnostic as I can be, meaning I don't die on the sword for multifamily. I believe in it. I believe in the thesis, but you better believe the moment that a pro forma doesn't show me something convincing, you better believe if the market doesn't look compelling in terms of those fundamentals and job growth, population growth, the crime and everything else down to the neighborhood, I'm not going to be comfortable with that project. So, the reason why I probably won't be looking at those other asset classes right now is purely because I know that I don't have the capacity to go lean into them to understand them well enough yet.
Mm.
And I think senior housing could be interesting. I don't know enough about it right now, particularly based on implications for seniors in a COVID setting, given that we're now moving toward, I mean, we already are in the worst state of COVID that we've been in as a planet. And I'm no signs of slowing there. So, on some other side of this curve, I'm more of an optimist, of course. Yes, vaccines are coming and stuff, but we don't really know where that other shoe is going to land yet. I do think that's going to probably create some excellent opportunities for value add. I see very respectable operators that are out there that, if from an operator perspective, excellent track records in senior living. And I would be like, okay, at least I would go talk to that person and see what they had to say about it. So at least on that front, for sure. We actually invested, I invested in a mobile home park deal as an LP earlier this year. We were on the brink of making a push to go and do some deals on mobile home park. We opted not to, and we opted not to. And I want to share this. I'm happy to share this thesis with you and the audience, because it's just it's actually a bit of a values driven decision. And sometimes I think in real estate, that rubs some people that look at deals purely from a financial perspective the wrong way. You have to make a call sometimes. And, the way I look at sponsors and vetting is like with a 5-part framework. I look at the team, I look at the track record, I look at the communications. We can look at the legal side, we look at values. And I think that values will make some real estate investors literally chuckle, because they're like, hey, that's got some corny, squishy stuff. And I'm like, well, we are not comfortable at this stage focusing on the lowest rung of the socioeconomic ladder. And that's just a decision we made, not pushing that on anyone else, and not placing judgment on them either. But that just happens to be my current take and our current take on mobile home parks, because man, those IRRs and everything else look incredibly compelling, of course. And we have invested in one in the past, but we had to make a tough decision, just lean heavier into storage, lean heavier into multifamily on a very selective basis. But those were just our chosen asset classes for the time being. But it's probably going to change. In the future, like, we really try not to make decisions quickly because great decisions are made slowly. And, even coming down to, like, we've been approached by minimum 6, maybe 7 sponsors just in the last month asking, hey, we would love to have you join the GP, partner with us on a deal, bring in some investors, help in a variety of other ways. And I've had to say, we don't do that. We don't just jump into a deal with people on the first deal. And it helps us make better decisions more thoughtfully, because we take 3 to 6 months to get to know them personally. We invest in them first, put them through a background check with their, of course, with their permission and awareness. And then, and only then, once we've seen some cycles play through with the distributions and we see how they report and communicate to investors like us, then we're willing to go talk to them about a project. So it keeps us honest, and I think it's a little more slow and frankly, a little bit more deliberate than some folks are willing to do, because probably means that we don't grow as fast as we could, but it does mean that we're trying to do the best de-risked business that we can do.
Exactly, because you're playing a long game, which is the right game to play,
That's right.
Yeah, so that's good. So again, talking about the multifamily and the storage deals, can you talk about the markets and why you picking those markets? And of course, we can talk about, because it kind of ties into operator vetting process. But what type of markets are you choosing to let investors in?
Yeah, I think we have been heavy on the southeast. I think that Dallas was our primary market for a long time, and we're going to continue doing deals in Dallas. It's fascinating when you hear so many folks in the past 2 to 3 years in particular saying that places like Dallas are quote unquote saturated, and you're like, you do realize how massive that a place like Dallas is. It is absolutely massive. It has dozens and over 100 cities individually within the Dallas metro, and so when people say comments like that, I'm like, okay, well, you can't just throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, you look at the jobs picture. I mean, and look at the lease ups in the last 3 to 6 months. The data says otherwise. It says that it's not saturated. It says that you've actually got still more runway to go, and no one knew COVID was coming a year ago. And so now you're seeing acceleration of some of these migration trends from coastal cities. And that's not just a buzzword and hype. I mean, there is an element of that can be taken to an extreme, of course. I think it's also, you run the risk of making it sound like San Francisco is a ghost town and people are just like getting on buses to go out to Texas. And it's like, well, it's not quite that either. It just means that, yeah, rents drop in places like San Francisco, rents drop in places like New York. And they are headed to places that are more pro-business, places that are lower cost of living. And now you add in this interesting variable where companies are starting to make, like large companies, big employers, because jobs drive the number one kind of market fundamental, decisioning fundamental for a great investing market for these asset classes that we focus on, right? And so if a company decides to headquarter in a place in Texas versus a place in California, that's meaningful. And then what happens if half a dozen companies decide to go do that? So we're seeing those kinds of trends now accelerate because things like, COVID have driven, work from home up, and, stuff like that, and company policies changing around work from home. So, man, it gets me fired up and positive because it's a rosy picture for some of these secondary markets. So you look at North Carolina, big fan of Raleigh, Charlotte, we've done deals there just this year, multifamily. Now we actually recently started closing in two other the most westerly in the country that we've done so far in the U.S., which is Colorado Springs, Colorado. Used to live in Colorado for 10 years, so I'm very biased toward Colorado. I kind of miss living there every day. But also Boise, Idaho, and those ones that are on the western side of the states are just excellent for catching Californians. So they're attractive. They're just more breathing room. You got less traffic, you got reasonably lower cost of living. Maybe not in Colorado if you go to Denver, Boulder proper, but these are just beautiful places that allow people to live. And so we I like the narrative. We like the narrative for those kinds of markets.
Got it. So still talking about the markets, and you mentioning kind of you're looking for the job, because look, those apartments that the companies and you have, I mean, we're talking about renting. That's how we generate income. That's how people get paid. That's how the investors get paid. And that's how we sell the property based on that, on the unit count, and the occupancy level is very important to the entire kind of apartment game, right? So how do you keep those numbers up? Again, when you're talking about, and of course, I know there's a lot of people kind of working from home, but at the same time, companies 1913, like gone overnight, and a lot of those kind of changes and shifts are happening in the market due to the COVID. So can you talk about, let's say, just focusing on the Dallas kind of market, like what are the biggest employers that we're talking about in that specific market?
Yeah, well, I think on your first question, it's interesting because it's so tempting. If I think back to when I was purely a corporate employee in the W-2 world, maybe whether it's a startup or a big company, there is this notion that we're kind of conditioned to look at real estate as one giant bucket, right? I mean, if you hear, is the market up? Is the market down? There is no such thing as the market in real estate, as you already know, right? And so many listeners out there that do real estate investing know. Sure, there's macro trends that are driven by things such as mortgage rates, right? Like right now, yeah, there's some more buying happening, and mortgage rates are a big input to that. However, you don't have some mysterious creature out there that is the real estate market. You have cities, MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas, and you have neighborhoods, and that's it. And, you have these different pockets of areas. And so first and foremost, I think people just need to put away the shotgun and pull out the scalpel. Sorry for the violent example of tools, but I'll just say that, like, you got to go down to the market and the submarket and then have that conversation. Because if you're actually going to go and compare even down to A class, B class, C class within apartments, which has got to be the most, like, I'd even put that above the great debates about what markets are hotter or better to invest in. You got the A class, B class, C class, which one is more recession resilient debate. And the resilience of an A class property, which I used to be not very open to A class as a side note. And I think that we've actually closed on multiple A class properties now this year, because an A-class property where you have done a lease audit, meaning you've taken a look at all the people that currently live there, you've done a survey and figured out what job types that they're in, you understand the average income, the median income that they're bringing in this facility. Now you're talking about being able to make an informed decision about how likely is it to stay full. So if most of those folks that live there don't have service jobs or high risk, quote unquote, jobs, if they're not in the service, if they're not in food, if they're not in the travel industry, all that stuff, you're probably looking at stickier tenants with longer retention potential. And on A-class, what you really got to be looking for is making sure that the rents that you're trying to put together are actually attainable, because rent drops, that's your key risk in terms of the pro forma on an A-class. We also literally right now working on a C-class deal. I think the C-class, we don't do as many of them, but when I am comfortable with them, I'm comfortable with them because the job supply nearby, you're trying to keep up the occupancy rates more than anything on those ones too, because people are affected more. Same thing with mobile home parks, but I would say that C-class multifamily, you got people that are affected very much so, and stimulus is more of a consideration there, because you got to worry, is it coming, is it not coming, and are the people going to be there? So it's just a different underwrite, a different decision between these asset classes, but it's so risky for folks, myself included, when I used to do this, to make broad declarations about I'm A-class or die, I'm C-class or die. It's not that simple. I mean, I'm okay with the whole spectrum, assuming that you can actually go in and make a good informed decision about what type of tenants are going to be there, what type of job supply is going to be there. An example would be Austin, Texas. We haven't done a deal there recently, but we did one a couple of years ago. And I feel like really good about it right now, because like even right after we decided to move forward on a deal in Austin, Texas, there was a big announcement because Apple was going to put a campus there. And it's that type of stuff where you're like, okay, we're not talking about like a franchise new McDonald's location bringing jobs. We're talking about a significant investment from a very strong tech company with big employment count that is moving into this market, right? And so that's just one tiny example. I think there's so many others you could probably pull out, but thanks for letting me go on my soapboxy tangent.
No, that's fine, because you should probably just say, look, health kind of industry is big, because at least that's what I know in Texas. Again, I'm not from states, but as far as I'm familiar with US and what's happening in Texas overall, again, it's Dallas and Houston. So in Houston, I know there's a lot of kind of medical facilities there, and Dallas being one of them. And again, Amazon is there, so a lot of companies moving towards kind of West Coast as well. California, from New York area, again, where it's kind of high paying tax states into those states. And again, Texas being one of them. But
Right.
Something that I came across, and again, you kind of mentioned a few states. I want to just drop you 3 names, and you let me know if you know these people. Shannon? You don't know that person.
Shannon?
Shannon. Just say
Shannon.
yes. Just say yes or no if you know that person.
Okay.
And Reed?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Yes. So here you go. So 2 of the 3. So because I thought, again, when I looked at the pictures here on the website, I thought that looked familiar. And again, I was talking about Shannon Robnett, because you mentioned, doing some deals in Idaho area, because I know he's a big developer, and I had him here before the show. So I thought,
Cool.
that's him. I thought maybe that's him, but Andrew Campbell and Reed Goosen's. So
yeah, good guys.
I want talking about a great company of people that you're working with. So because I wanted to ask you with the following question is, how do you vet these potential people that you're going to be doing business with and allowing those investors to invest? And again, personally, me kind of knowing a little bit about Wildhorn, so it's kind of no-brainer, at least for me. But maybe you can take us behind the process of vetting potential, company that you can do business with.
Yeah, and I think as we go into this discussion, keep in mind, like I'm referencing a framework that we now use across different asset classes, and so it's also evolved quite a bit, because we now work with a set of about 7 different sponsors for our business that I joined in the GP for our deals. And so I would say, just like, no one out there should ascribe any individual sponsor's name to any of this framework. It's currently an application for our business as of November 2020. So that's my big old legal disclaimer. Here's what we look at: track record. And each of these has like a sub bucket bullet. That's pretty robust, so I have like actual nerdy spreadsheets sitting in front of me that I could always reference and bring up actual questions. If anyone ever wants to nerd out on that offline, please do reach out. I'm happy to do that with you. Track record, approach, comms, team, values. I added values on there at the end, but I do think it's important. So we look at all of those things. I think like the number one thing that apparently is not asked very often of sponsors, which I think is so critical, is failure response, as I talk about it. And what that simply means is like, man, this is hard work. It's just hard work, and what's so hard about it is that you're going to fail at some point, well, like anything else in life and in business, you're going to get hit with something really challenging. And I want to know, before I go into something with a partner, have they been through something extraordinarily challenging before? And how did they come out of that? And it doesn't always necessarily need to mean that they went through a capital call, like in a multifamily deal. It could totally mean, okay, has this person been through, like we now work with a different sponsor who used to be former technology entrepreneurs. And if they had a brutally challenging story where they had to wind down a former tech company, then they had to lay off employees or wind them down. That kind of stuff is absolutely something I would accept as one member of a team, to understand they're going to make good decisions and they have the grit and the wherewithal to make good decisions, under duress, because if they have my money invested in their deal as an LP, and later if they have our investors' money invested in their deal as an LP, we have to make sure that their hand is calmly and firmly on the wheel of this thing in the event that it hits some headwinds. And so I think failure response has got to be one that doesn't seem to come up often enough, as you hear people talk about how they evaluate sponsors. But of course, all the other table stakes stuff, which I've mentioned a couple times here today, I think are so critical. Like, got to make sure that they've actually done this a couple times, bare minimum. You got to make sure that they've put skin in the game. They're actually investing in their own deal. I look at a bare minimum of at least 5% of the equity capital stack in a deal. I think that type of stuff really, really matters. And in addition to the fact that I want to hear that they actually have a philosophy on something like tenant relations, but particularly within COVID, because you don't know what the future will bring. You have to get more proactive. And, we could be still a couple of years out, unfortunately, from where this whole COVID thing is going to wrap up. So that, the grit, the wherewithal, and the compassion for tenants is super critical right now.
Definitely. Yeah. So I love the fact that you're, again, looking at these operators and kind of vetting them, not even currently in the projects and the deals that they're working on, but you're looking behind like what they did previously and, what they did prior to this business. Because it's very important, just kind of, because it's people that's operating these businesses, and maybe somebody been successful, doing a couple of deals right now, maybe before the COVID, but what they're going to do next? Because everybody can do good in the good times.
That's right.
What happens at a bad time. So yeah, vetting process is crucial for that. But how much of you are you involved in a day-to-day kind of operations? Like, do you talk with these operators kind of on the day-to-day basis, and how you're aware about their personal plans, and do you get updates from them, and like how do you involve with these projects, so like overall, and how much time do you spend?
Yeah, it's a good question. So upfront, the diligence that we do is significantly deeper than really any other co-sponsors that I know. And so, everyone and their mother out there likes to say, if they're bringing equity capital investors to deals as the heaviest contribution, they like to say, "Oh, I'm betting the deal," and I'm like, "Well, show me the homework, man." So that is something we're very proud of, and I think that we actually walk the walk on. Once you're into the deal, there's a variety of ways that we typically are helping out. So like just now, last Friday, we closed on a storage facility, and with that partnership, I mean, I talk to our partner every week, about how things are going, and then I want to give updates back to our investors, and so that partnership is like a really nice kind of deep one. So it depends on the partnership, but I would say the goal would be looking for sponsors and partners that want to have complementary skills, because I came from tech. So, a lot of the stuff that I consider pretty second nature about something as simple as like doing a webinar that is substantive and organized, and, taking in deep investor questions, giving good answers up front, and being able to provide some meaningful data to folks. All of that is just super second nature to me from my experiences back in the old tech world. So another example would be, being able to go a layer deeper on diligence, because there's some very cool data that's out there now that you could pull for things like comps, and you can compare to how things are tracking in the market compared to what you had on pro forma. So in most deals, at least on a minimum, we're talking to a lot of our sponsors on a monthly, quarterly basis. But I'm not the asset manager day to day, and I never strive to be necessarily on our current projects. It wouldn't. I would probably lose my. I would lose my hair if I was trying to do all that. It's complementary strengths. That's what we're going for.
For sure. Listen, a question I want to ask you, besides real estate, again, you being a tech guy, would you see, again, just give me your perspective and thoughts. It doesn't have to be something that you maybe know, because maybe you don't have information about that. But being a tech guy, do you think, or maybe some things that will kind of change, because there's disruptions happening on multiple levels right now, in different industries. So would you think there will be some disruptions with technology in real estate industry going further, maybe with machine learning, kind of AI type of based technologies?
Yeah, that's a fun topic. I don't think anyone's asked me that question that way on a podcast. Absolutely. I think as a guy who came previously from the very glamorous world of kind of payroll, taxes, accountancy and payroll software. I worked at, Intuit, and then I worked at a company called Xero with an X, and then I worked at a company called Gusto with it. And all three of those companies back to back solved the back office problems for software for small businesses. And I just bring that up because, what I learned there was, we were helping small business owners, and we were also helping virtual CFOs, CPAs, bookkeepers. Folks that are deeply traditional and very tough to change the minds of, and very frugal. So, most CPAs, I would hope, would acknowledge that outright. I bring that up because real estate has a lot in common, stylistically. You've got the majority of real estate professionals, whether they're on lending, whether they're on brokerage, whether they're on property management, whether they're purely on the investor side, they're many are set in their ways. And I would say that tech is coming, and every industry that has ever said this is more art than science, I would challenge them to go do their homework on that phrase in business, any facet of business, because over a long enough time horizon, it's incorrect. Science is coming, and because you look at things such as lending. I came from the lending side at Lending Home. If you saw the, some of the guts of how these decisions are made and how much data is available to make great decisions on lending, I think most people that do traditional stuff on a spreadsheet, before they make decisions, would look at that and say, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible." It's absolutely incredible as to what's available. But yeah, I think dynamic pricing. I was literally talking to a really seasoned LP investor just this last week about a sponsor who does not use dynamic pricing to understand and underwrite deals more effectively. But that kind of data is available. Like literally right now, I'm running a pilot with myself and our analyst to look at comps, at comps that are available in the market, because more comp data on a certain platform. I won't name them today, but I'll just say we're using, one of the newer data platforms to pull out comp data on rental comps and sales, price values or prices and values for properties, so we can compare them to pro forma for these deals. So stuff like that is already very much available, but the uptake and how often people are willing to use it in the industry is going to start creating in my opinion, a much bigger spread in terms of execution effectiveness, for both asset management and otherwise. You do hear some folks out there, this is the last comment, is some folks out there would claim up and down that when they manage a project in a place like multifamily, that they're using data in ways that significantly improve their efficiency, right? And meaning that they can cut down on expenses, and also that they can increase revenues because they're able to capture every possible revenue opportunity because of things like tech systems and stuff. And so I believe that to be true. Some sponsors and some operators out there are just able to learn and build processes and use that data more effectively. So in the end, long story short, it's still just a tool. And I think that good business is still going to be, in real estate at least, human on some level. I don't think that you're going to see a complete replacement of of handshakes and, at least outside the context of COVID,
Yeah.
with data and robots. You're still going to have people. So what it comes down to is who's willing to ramp up on how to use these tools and apply it within their business in the modern world.
Yeah, well, unless your strategy, you want to build a REIT and sell a stock, maybe that's a technology that can help you to, to do something there. But behind the scenes, is still going to be people who are closing on properties and building relationships and, running operations. And of course, part of the technology will make those operations and maybe closing. And, when it comes to providing great returns for investors, maybe technology will do something there for the people. And of course, like a lot of companies who kind of, that's how they run their business for many years. Now they're getting implemented and changed with the technology, and again, because it's a huge disruption happening. But we'll see in the near future. But again, talking about those multifamily and the storage unit deals that you have, can you talk about, again, from a limited partner side, how those deals are going to be structured so they can invest in those deals? Is it going to be the same for multifamily or storage, or is it going to be a little bit different?
Yeah, very similarly. I would just say that you're usually seeing similar hold periods and similar structures, similar distribution cadences. I think that, yeah, there's a couple things that are just fundamentally different between the two. People are typically excited for things on multifamily, such as you could use cost segregation, whereas, a multifamily facility is pretty complex. You have just not only a lot of materials that have gone into creating that thing and making it work and comfortable for everybody. You've also just got more stuff to depreciate. And so on storage, it really depends. Sometimes you've got a big old slab of concrete, you've got a gate, you've got some steel doors and housing, and that's it. And so and a roof, so there's not a whole lot you could do there. But I would just say that was a brief comment just on depreciation stuff and cost seg. But beyond that, yeah, I would say very similar as structures in some ways.
Got it. And by the SEC standards, I mean, who would be available to invest on those deals? And is there a certain criteria that those people have to fit to make sure that they can invest?
Yeah, I mean, most are only open to accredited investors, and so I think if folks ever need more education on that, there's just a ton of it available out there, and I'm always happy to talk with folks as well. But I think it is getting, I would say, tougher for non-accredited investors to find deals that make sense for their circumstances, because there's more and more use of like the 506C exemption versus the 506B, and so more and more options. But that said, in parallel, you will see more and more places that are offering like crowdfunding, and so, crowdfunding companies, which I proactively bring up. I think this is like it's the rising tide that raises all ships, and I think that it's education for an asset class I believe in. And I want people to feel like, no one out there should ever be saying that one option just with me, multifamily or die. That should never be the message, because great investing comes down to and, it's not an or. Right? Like I believe rentals are a great fit for our portfolio. I also believe multifamily is a great fit for portfolio. I also believe storage is a great fit for portfolio. No one out there who is truly high net worth has typically gotten there with one singular way. So I really, really believe you got to make sure that that you're open-minded on asset class, and also for options that are folks that are not accredited. There are more options out there now.
Yeah, definitely. And multifamily and storage units being one of those great options. Because look, as I said before in the beginning of the conversation, is just because giving people clarity, and of course people can get in contact with you, and I definitely recommend for them to do that, to kind of expand the awareness and get more information, because there's a lot of different moving pieces in this business, but it's not that difficult when it comes to limited partner side, when it comes to investing in those deals. Is just figuring out, again, the tax advantages, the holding periods, what I'm going to get from returns and stuff like that, so they can talk with those, conversations, have those privately with you. But, it's going to be definitely a great way for them, as you mentioned, diversify a portfolio. It's not the one strategy. It's just one of the strategies that you can build your wealth. And again, that's a good strategy to have. So besides that, again, building your current business, again, with your wife, Jennifer, and, building that successfully, getting more, people involved with your business, providing them great returns, I'm sure, and continue to grow that. What is your personal legacy that you're looking to leave behind you as well?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, because I've been having this conversation more frequently with our investors, because it's one of the most important things I think you can ask if you're considering working with someone from an investment perspective is, what's your intent? What's your big why? And for me, I have like one of the most simple whys, and I'm the anti-empire guy. What I want is I want to be a great dad and a present husband, and I want to help my kids get a really great worldview by actually physically living in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world at some point, and have full geographical autonomy, full financial autonomy, and I want to leave the world better by having not only given that lens to my children, but also showing them the values that we operate every single day. So I think that's my primary one. I think we also have some really fun stuff we're going to be working on in the coming months to years when it comes to giving back. And so I think the beauty of financial success is you're also able to do things like giving more. And so that's it for me. It's pretty simple. It's just those things.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, if you just start with a personal kind of, background with the family of yours, having an impact on your children and, giving them an example, which of course there's a lot of families missing that, because, the story behind the educational system and not providing enough information, how we can become wealthy, or just getting that right financial, information, so we can make better, investing decisions going in the future. And you're going to be providing that to your kids. And it will be, creating those ripple effects across, across maybe multiple industries. Maybe it's going to be real estate, who knows? But
Totally.
that's a great way to go about just starting with your own kind of personal, platform. So again, I appreciate you, Spencer, again, for coming on today and sharing all this great information. I mean, there's definitely much more available what we covered today, because I'm sure I missed many questions, and I definitely recommend for you who is watching or listening to this episode, get in contact with Spencer. And of course, his personal social media links are going to be there. If you want to go to the website, that's madisoninvesting.com for more information about the deals and the way it works, the way you can invest with that. And one thing that I wanted to ask you before we're going to go, if you shared this episode with a friend of yours, and best case scenario, of course, if that person is looking to invest in those type of multifamily or storage unit deals, or maybe he's just looking to get educated what real estate can do for him or her. So make sure to pass this episode along. And again, thank you, Spencer, again, for coming over and providing all this value. I really appreciate it. Yeah,
thank you. Really honored by the invite, and it's been a blast.
Thank you. So again, guys, make sure to share this episode. And as always, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.